Well, you may be seated. How many of you are afraid of snakes? Yes. Well, the term for that is called a phytophobia. And it appears that most, if not all, of Israel had a phytophobia by the end of the Old Testament lesson. This was the final chapter in a series of complaints by the Israelites. Food, water, you name it. As a parent, I was kind of thinking first as whiny toddlers, and then, unfortunately, more of self-engaged teenagers. This time, the response of God was a doozy, like something out of a science fiction movie. Snakes were coming from everywhere, biting and killing people. It must have been pretty frightening. But once again, the Israelites repented and called to Moses and asked for help. And God gave Moses one of what I think is the strangest commands in the Old Testament. Create a snake out of bronze, put it on a pole, and lift it up above the people. And whoever looks up at that snake shall live. Look up and believe. The venom becomes the anti-venom. Death becomes life. Well, what brings health? What brings life? The very term salvation comes from a Latin word, salve. And that comes from an even older Greek word, soterio. In English, this is a sort of a general term for health, as it was in Latin. And words come to English from that root. Salve, like you put on a wound. Salvage, like what you get when something is wrecked and what you can save from that. Salvo, which is when a guns shoot a greeting or sometimes a warning, but often a greeting or a welcome. Salute, which was a greeting for health, and even the Russian Salyut spaceship. The Russian word comes also from health. So it's all salvation, saving in some terms. To be saved is to be made well. It's to be made whole. Health and salvation are intertwined and are in fact, in the Bible, one and the same. The very wise psalmist in today's reading tells us how many ways we can be in poor health. If you read the entire psalm, you'll find that there are several ways. In fact, the psalmist mentions 4 ways. We can wander away in some sort of wasteland, and God redeems us with food and water, maybe literally or maybe metaphorically. We enter into the darkness. Perhaps that means mental illness, and God brings us relief. We're sick from sin. We've separated ourselves from God, and God brings us health. We're drowning and helpless, and God brings us to a safe haven. When I returned to church after about a 10-year hiatus, I don't think I realized that I was probably suffering in some degree from all those conditions. And it took me a long time back in the church to realize that I had been made healthy again. I'd been saved. So what are we to make of this cross? Why would Jesus compare the cross to a serpent on a staff? I think the common thread is the word belief, or rather the verb to believe. For Christians, to believe is an action verb. It's nothing passive. It's not an adverb. It's not a passive verb. It's an action verb. The Israelites could not merely just look at the snake. They had to believe in its healing power. To have eternal life, we must not merely look at the cross. We must not merely worship the cross. We must believe in the Christ who died for us and that we're restored to health, to right relation with God. It worked for me, so I figure it can work for other people. Not once did I ever think of this process as not going to hell. I considered it life, it's health, and it's being in right relationship with God and humanity. So as we get into this next week of Lent, are you ready to look up at that cross? Are you ready to say, I believe, knowing that that belief may cost you? I hope that you, me, and we are ready to look up. Because when we know that we're looking up at the cross, Jesus' death, it's also to look at life. Life that is abundant, eternal, and it's there for you and I and everyone who says, I believe.
Mommy.